Welcome to the Com Analytics channel. This is Boris Tizenhausen with you. Today is June 30th. Here are the main news stories at this moment. So, cunning Ukraine has decided to leave Putin not only without fuel, but also without communication. In other words, God already left him without sense, and now Ukraine has decided to deprive him of communication as well. Today, Ukrainian drones once again struck one of the key facilities of Russia's military satellite communication system, the Dubna Space Communications Center in the Moscow region. This is 500 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. This center provides the operation of satellite communication channels, data transmission, government communications, and the control of certain spacecraft. Overall, the facility was used, among other things, for reconnaissance and for coordinating Russian troops. This is already the second strike on this center in just the past week, and the third strike overall on the space communications facility. Russia has a limited number of large ground-based space communication centers. That is, this state operator, Space Communications, has only 7 teleports in total. Vladimir, Medvezhye Ozero, Skolkovo, Zheleznogorsk, Khabarovsk, and the technical center on Shabolovka in Moscow. It's important to understand that these centers are precisely the ground segment of the Russian Federation's space system. In other words, a satellite by itself is absolutely useless if there is no connection with the ground, and it is impossible to send it commands or receive information from it. It is precisely through such complexes that military satellite communications are routed. Russia can still replace one such center, but if 2 or 3 of them go out of service, that becomes critical. For the Russian army, this could mean a decline in the quality of secure satellite communications between headquarters and troops, slower transmission of intelligence information, and also difficulties in operating certain satellite channels. These centers house unique antennas that Russia cannot replace under current sanctions. It is these antennas that Ukrainian drones are targeting. Putin's guards are being deprived of satellite communications. And here's another piece of news that now seems completely normal, but just 6 months ago would have seemed like science fiction. Russia is negotiating with other countries to import fuel, but will not disclose which countries it plans to buy the fuel from. This was stated by Peskov, so they let out that mustachioed floozy look, but why not reveal it, Peskov? Seriously, what's the problem? Are you afraid of something? So tell us, where is Russia going to buy fuel from? And also, Putin said that there are enough reserves. He literally said this just yesterday. So why are you holding any negotiations at all? I really don't understand Russians. Honestly, Putin told them this in an interview. No need to panic, there's fuel, everything is sufficient, all the gas stations are working, the shortage isn't critical. So why are Russians standing in line at gas stations for hours on end? Do they not trust Putin or something? But honestly, I'm still under the impression from Putin's latest interview where he was reading from a teleprompter. In fact, he couldn't even read the text properly from the teleprompter, and they sat the propagandist Zarubin in front of him. This propagandist Zarubin pretended to be asking Putin questions. Putin was reading from the teleprompter and reading very poorly. He couldn't manage some words at all. He was squinting like this, as if thinking, what did Peskov or whoever else write for me here? Is he even capable of functioning? Listen, he can't even have a conversation with Zarubin. He's always reading from cue cards, from teleprompters. Is he even capable of functioning? Have Russians ever asked themselves this question? By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's important. You can do it right now. We are fighting against Putin's propaganda. It will be much more effective if we do it together. And let me remind you that everyone who subscribes to this channel will have soft and silky hair. So go ahead and subscribe. Meanwhile, more news from Russia. The demand for hand sights has increased by 480%. Is this related to the fuel situation? It's unknown, according to the marketplace. In other words, hand sights used for cutting grass are now being bought on a truly massive scale. It's time to return to our roots. Gasoline is all the work of the devil. I'm just waiting for Patriarch Kirill to say that gasoline is a completely non-traditional value. After all, people used to live without gasoline, and Russia will manage now as well. Whenever I open Russian news, I immediately know it's Russian news. Here's the singer Shaman. Let's put it this way. Here's a news headline. Singer Shaman showed his underwear on air and declared that Russian rulers used to rule without underwear at all. Mizulina has really been doing poorly lately. Well, like everyone else, like all of Putin's entourage. Lukashenko. Lukashenko is up to something. Belarus will respond with its full potential if Ukraine crosses its borders, the Belarusian Foreign Ministry stated. And who gave Lukashenko this newfound courage? Was it Goodwin or Xi Jinping? Lukashenko met with the leader of China. He is currently in China. I watched footage of Lukashenko's meeting with Xi Jinping. Lukashenko looked very frightened, very obsequious. You could tell he had come to bow down, so to speak. Given the chronology of events, it's clear why Lukashenko is scared. Let's recall the events of the past few days. Ukraine issued Lukashenko an ultimatum: remove the relay stations. Lukashenko didn't dare play with fire. He's removing the relay stations, shutting them down, and just in case, even apologized to Zelensky. After that, he was summoned to Putin, where he spent 2 days at Valdai talking about something with Putin behind closed doors. Then Lukashenko hurriedly flew to China, and not on the same plane he arrived in Russia on, but on another, a brand new one. The aircraft that came for him took off straight to China. I suppose just to be on the safe side. Lukashenko didn't want to take any chances flying on the plane that had been sitting for 2 days at Putin's airport. Who knows what might have been done to that plane? In short, to sum up, Putin's situation is complicated. He now needs to raise the stakes. It's the perfect time to give the Nelikov Club a kick and drag Lukashenko into the war more seriously. Lukashenko doesn't want that. He keeps saying everywhere that Belarus will never be drawn into the war. Russia stages a provocation with a Belarusian bus, hitting a bus carrying Belarusian children with a drone. That doesn't help. Lukashenko still digs in his heels. At Valdai, they try to pressure him further. Well, and I think that there he was possibly made to understand that if he doesn't do what is expected of him now, then in the near future the leadership in Belarus might change, or Belarus might be annexed by the Russian Federation. That's when Lukashenko goes to China, mumbling to seek protection from Xi. And here Xi Jinping makes a statement in support of, I quote, the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Belarus. Well, it's clearly read as a public signal from Beijing to Moscow. Don't touch Minsk. Of course, there's probably also a signal here to Ukraine, but sovereignty and territorial integrity are specifically a message to Moscow, as if to say, Lukashenko is under our umbrella, hands off. And it's clear that Ukraine has no claims on the territorial integrity of Belarus. So who does have such claims? Well, it's the bold underground commander. That's why Lukashenko ran to ask for help, and he got that help. Now, regarding the threats from the Belarusian Foreign Ministry, I think the reverse is also true. If someone crosses the border from Belarusian territory, as happened in 2022, now Ukraine will respond with all available means. And Ukraine does have the means to respond. Lukashenko understands this perfectly well. And I have a feeling that if Ukraine crosses the Belarusian border, at that very moment, Lukashenko will cross the border into Russia. Or actually, I think not even Russia, but will rush by plane straight to China again. I think that's exactly where he's set up his backup airfield. Well, and who in Belarus is going to fight for Lukashenko? And let's be clear, Ukraine is not planning to cross the border with Belarus. But what if the Belarusian volunteers want to return home? So, who exactly is going to fight for Lukashenko in Belarus? Well, I watched Lukashenko's channel, and he took part in a diploma awarding ceremony for graduates of the first joint educational program in biotechnology. That is, this was at Peking University. Lukashenko took part in it there? Why? Because his little Kolya is receiving his diploma there today. So his son is standing there with a diploma from Peking University. I've always wanted to ask, why is it that Nikolai, his precious little son, didn't study at the best universities in Belarus, but instead studied in China? In general, the expired Draniki has sorted everything into the right baskets, everything that could be sorted, and I think that when the time comes to run, he won't flee to the Moscow suburbs, to Assad and Yanukovych, but rather to Beijing. And Ukraine is performing an incredible feat right now. It is holding back a huge Russian army, truly enormous. And in every episode, we have an important fundraiser for Ukraine's defense forces. Today we are starting a fundraiser for drones for our paratroopers, the 7th Rapid Response Course of the Air Assault Forces, which is fighting the enemy in one of the hottest spots near Pokrovsk. The soldiers have recorded a video message for you. Please take a look.
Бажаю міцного десантного здоров'я. 7-й корпус швидкого реагування ДШВ б'є ворога на найгарячішій ділянці фронту під Покровськом. Ми нарощуємо наші спроможності по ударам на оперативно-тактичну глибину. Закуповуємо станції, зв'язок для розвідувальних та ударних дронів. Разом з глядачами каналу Бориса Тізенгаузена відкриваємо збір на Middle Strike 7-го корпусу. Наша мета – 1 мільйон гривень. Слава Україні! Слава ДШВ!
Let's help our paratroopers. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There's also a QR code in the corner. That's in case you're watching on another channel. It also leads to the fundraiser. The Middle Strike, which the fundraiser is for, is a class of military strike drones with medium range. It is designed to destroy enemy logistics, warehouses, headquarters, and air defense systems behind enemy lines. In short, with your help, our paratroopers will strike the enemy effectively, fiercely, and mercilessly. And in every episode, I want to thank you separately for helping our soldiers and supporting Ukraine. Meanwhile, as Putin, detached from reality, claimed that everything was fine with gasoline and there were no problems, it turns out that Russians have their own reality. And it is different from Putin's reality. Let me quote. The gasoline apocalypse in Krasnodar. Drivers spend days stuck in traffic jams just for a canister of fuel. These are local news reports. There is no gasoline at the gas stations. And where it is still available, you can spend your entire workday there. Comment exhausted Krasnodar drivers in kilometer-long lines at gas stations that don't clear up even at 4 a.m. Chita Zabaikalsky Krai. Residents have been standing in line at gas stations for more than a day, and the fuel purchase limit has been reduced to 15 liters. I think you've seen the videos of these kilometer-long chains of cars even without me. The entire internet is flooded with these videos. People stand all night, stand all day, get in line in the evening, in the morning. There are fights, hysteria in the queues, and it's only going to get worse. It's going to get even worse. Sometimes you come across comments from Russians who try to reassure themselves and other Russians. Among them, there are real gems. Today I came across one from a certain lady. I'm not afraid of the lack of food in stores or gasoline. I have peace in my heart. There's no panic. After all, it can't be worse than during World War II. That's what the lady writes. Amazing? Really amazing. But why should it be worse than during World War II? I just can't understand this logic. After all, it can't be worse than at the end of the Cretaceous period, when a giant asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula, causing tsunamis, massive fires, the sun was hidden by ash for years, and 75% of all species on Earth disappeared. But still, it can't be worse than that, right? Or in any case, it can't be worse than during the plague in the 1340s. Back then, 200 million people died in the epidemic, and now, in the war, only 1.5 million Russians have been killed or wounded. It can't be worse than that. What kind of logic is that? It's idiotic logic. At the current rate of strikes on Russian oil refineries, by the end of the year, only about 30% of Russia's oil processing capacity may remain. Russian experts have already calculated this. That's the best case scenario because possible ballistic strikes haven't even been factored in here. In other words, essentially 2/3 of the processing capacity of Russian refineries will be cut, and by that time, there won't be any reserves left either. Can you imagine what kind of effect this will have across the entire Russian Federation? By the way, this is still a very optimistic forecast. The situation in Crimea is getting worse and worse. There, Aksionov, that little ghoul, tried 2 weeks ago to say, any moment now we'll get fuel sales back on track, we'll fix the electricity situation, don't worry. And what was the result? The exodus from occupied Crimea continues. The energy bridge caught fire, or rather is burning, even though it hasn't been completely destroyed yet. So last night there was a fire at the Kuban transfer station. This is a crucial part of the energy bridge that connects the Russian Federation's power grid with occupied Crimea across the Kerch Strait. Our drones flew there, Back in the day, the Russian Federation built this energy bridge to Crimea, laying cables right along the bottom of the Kerch Strait. And at this Kuban transfer station, the overhead power line from the Russian Federation transitions into underwater cables, which then cross the strait into Crimea. It's literally the gateway of the energy bridge to Crimea. And that's where the fire broke out. In general, there is a systematic dismantling of the power system in occupied Crimea. At this rate, Crimea will soon be cut off not only from logistics, but also from power supply. Yes, it will be cut off from everything. And now mass layoffs have begun in Crimea due to a fuel shortage. So it's hitting the local labor market. Obviously, residents of the peninsula report layoffs. People are being sent on unpaid leave. The television has collided with reality. A big hello to all the traitors, collaborators, rats, scoundrels, and other ghouls who laughed at a freezing Ukraine. Remember this winter when the Russians were striking our energy infrastructure? Ha 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 ha. Remember how they filmed those videos? So, how's it going now? Is it funny? Well, now imagine that by winter, Ukraine will be launching many more drones and missiles. And for the attacks on our energy sector, the Russians will get a very tough response. Now, a cold winter awaits the Russians too, and their winters are much colder. There will be no fuel, no electricity, nothing at all. Putin is literally taking Russians by the hand and leading them back to the Stone Age. Well, as for Putin himself, he'll have electricity, fuel, and black caviar, so there's no need to worry about him. The authorities in Sevastopol have announced that fuel supply restrictions in the city will remain in place for about another month. How could this happen? How can it be about a month? Aksionov, you literally just said the other day, I'll sort everything out now. And Putin promised to ensure the delivery of gasoline to Crimea, both by sea and by land. The residents of occupied Crimea were probably shocked by this blatant lie. Well, not everyone, of course. How come they didn't think of bringing fuel themselves by land and by sea, huh? People are now leaving Crimea to get gasoline in Krasnodar Krai. How do they get gasoline in Crimea? They drive out through the Kerch Bridge to Krasnodar Krai. From Sevastopol, for example, it's about 700 kilometers to drive. You can drive those 700 kilometers to Krasnodar Krai and not find any gasoline, and only find enough just for the trip itself, meaning you end up wasting the whole journey there and back. And in Krasnodar Krai, people already fiercely hate the residents of Crimea because they're scooping up the last of the gasoline, which is already in short supply for the locals there. I've seen a couple of videos where residents of occupied Crimea complain that when they see our region's license plates, they slash the tires or do other kinds of damage. What's going on? How can this be? We don't abandon our own. By what land or by what sea does Putin plan to deliver gasoline to Crimea? The old windbag probably doesn't know that the ferries which used to transport fuel to Crimea have been burned. Of course, there's still the so-called road of death by land. Putin could try to drive a fuel tanker from the Azov region to Crimea himself. I'd like to see that. In short, the underground ghoul has played himself. And I have a video showing how the Russians are delivering gasoline, or rather trying to deliver gasoline, by land to Crimea, escorted by mobile fire teams. In short, the video is simply epic. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces destroyed the Russian fuel trucks along with the mobile fire teams guarding them. Take a look at this video.
Повітряна тривога, лети до Таганрога, дістань до Волгограда, Саратов потруси, нехай гримить в Тамбові, Рязані та Ростові, як до Москви дістанешся, то нахуй рознеси. Дехто каже, що це гріх і так не треба, гнів та розпач можуть карму зіпсувати. Бачу сльози, чути стогін аж до неба, за це все капи мають поздихати.
Tsik, they wanted to deliver gasoline to Crimea, but they didn't ask for Magyar's permission. You shouldn't do that. You know, when I look at this footage, it's like a real-life Mad Max. It's like Fuel Town, just like in the movies. Benzograd, the Citadel, fuel tanks, crazy Russians speeding down the road of death. This probably isn't how Russians imagined the war would be. 5 years into the full-scale invasion, And just to give Russians a little wake-up call that things are only going to get worse, the European Commission announced today that it will allocate almost 4 billion euros to Ukraine for the purchase of drones. There will be even more, all kinds, and some very interesting ones. Meanwhile, in the Oriol region of the Russian Federation, Rosneft and Gazprom gas stations decided to approach the issue with some creativity. There, they will be selling gasoline based on car license plate numbers, according to the governor of the Oriol region. How will this work on Saturday? On Saturday, only cars with license plates starting with 0 and 1 will be able to refuel. On Sunday, those starting with 2 and 3. On Monday, 4 and 5, and so on and so on and so on. Is this already Goida or not? What even is this? Soon there will probably be some kind of state lottery there. Remember, in the Soviet times there was a lottery in the mornings. I just can't recall if it was 6 out of 49, 5 out of 36, something like that. Now it's the same thing. In the morning on TV in the Oriol region, they spin a drum, pull out a motorist's number, the lucky car owner who will get a canister of gasoline today. Well, and of course, Russians are starting to get a bit upset. In Voronezh, there was a video where a local resident, clearly angry, walks around filming the remains of this semiconductor device assembly plant that was hit by missiles, and he asks a lot of uncomfortable questions. So he's angry and says, "Listen, Putin, you promised to strike the West immediately if Western missiles arrived. Now our plant is gone. The building was just wiped out completely. Why aren't you striking the West?" That's a good question. Here's another question. This resident is upset that there used to be air defense near his house, but then it was taken away somewhere. And not just near his house. So where are all the air defense systems being taken now? And this resident suspects that the air defense systems are being moved somewhere to the Moscow region. And third, it seems this resident no longer wants war. As soon as strikes started hitting the Russian Federation hard, Russians suddenly lost their desire for this kind of war. They don't like it anymore. They liked it when they watched on TV as strikes hit Ukraine, but they don't like this kind of war. From here on, everything will be very simple. I think the FSB will have a preventive talk with this resident, but it's absolutely clear that discontent is brewing, especially against the backdrop of the gasoline crisis. I wonder, does anyone still believe the underground Baldy? In the interview, he said that Russian troops are 5 kilometers from Kupiansk. He was saying all sorts of nonsense there, reading from teleprompters. He said that the troops are 5 kilometers from Kupiansk. He thinks that no one remembers anything at all. He thinks no one uses the internet the way he does. That very Kupiansk, where Putin invited foreign journalists a few months ago so they could see for themselves that Kupiansk was completely under Russian control. But he said that himself, or was it some other version of him speaking? The same Kupiansk for which Putin handed out state awards. He even awarded the title of Hero of Russia to one general for it. And now it turns out that the Russians haven't even reached Kupiansk yet. There are still 5 kilometers left. By the way, how is Malaya Takmachka doing over there? And of course, how could we go without mentioning the Russian Orthodox Church? I couldn't pass by this news. Another statement from the Russian Orthodox Church. If you didn't know, it's a branch of the FSB. So who was it? Bishop Peterim of the Russian Orthodox Church stated that only suffering and illness can correct modern people, that people are too self-absorbed, have stopped sacrificing their time and wealth, and that all their thoughts are about how to settle down here and now, according to the representative of the Russian Orthodox Church. Peterim, Russians really don't want to sacrifice themselves for higher causes anymore. No one wants to just die for Putin for free. In general, the Russian Orthodox Church is just some kind of deranged undead. It's okay. When Russia starts to fall apart, these ones will scatter too. And I think that immediately, instantly, they'll be dragged back down to the underworld from where they all crawled out. It's long overdue. And you friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, don't forget. And let's help our paratroopers. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine!